tiger salamander. Here we have our mud puppy, and yes, the mud puppy is quite a bit larger than the tiger salamander. But you'll notice the tiger salamander in some ways has better muscle definition. So on the practical, I'm planning on having both animals. It just depends on what I'm going to tag and which animal will be used for that. So it's worthwhile looking at both animals, comparing them, so that you're prepared for the practical. All right, so let's begin with the easy stuff. This shows really nicely on our tiger salamander versus our mud puppy, but horizontal scalagena septum, myosepta, and myomeres, right? Not as clear here. They're there, especially when you got a little bit of connective tissue here, but this shows it very nicely. All of the myomeres dorsal to the horizontal scalagena septum make up epaxials. Here we see our hypaxials, again, epaxials and hypaxials. More specifically, all the epaxials on the trunk in the mud puppy are called dorsalis trunci. The hypaxial muscles of the trunk were at the outer sheet, which is the same outer sheet we see in your rat. This is the external abdominal oblique. All right, so obviously I'd have to phrase the question so you know which one I'm looking for. We see the same thing here. All right, let's start off with the head. So I think the head muscles are easier to see on the mud puppy than our little tiger salamander. But we got these two muscles right here. We've got the anterior mandibular levator and external mandibular levator. And then of course on the side of the jaw we've got the mandibular depressor. So we can see that depressor here. We can see our anterior and external mandibular levators, but they're just not as well defined as they are here, and a little harder for you to see. These little muscles that are kind of going out to the gills we see here are the branchial levators. And they're easier to see on the tiger salamander than the mud puppy because the mud puppy's got some like gelatinous-like material here. All right, let's look at the underside. So we have two muscles here and here. We have the intermandibularis and the interhyoideus. And they're a little easier to see here, I think, even though they're hard to separate because, again, the fascicles have nice borders here that show up a bit better. But there's your intermandibularis, your interhyoideus. This gular fold is actually lower than it is on your mud puppy, which is going to influence some of the muscles you'll be trying to see here. In fact, got a little bit of skin under there too. So it's going to affect some of the things like this muscle here, the procoracohumerus is going to go under the gular fold, making it a little harder for you to follow. Okay, so here we are on the neck, rectus cervicus. Here we are on the chest. This is the supracoracoideus on the coracoid plate. Behind it we have our pectoralis. All right, pretty straightforward. This is the procoracohumerus. And then depending on your animal, depending on what angle you can see it at, for some animals we can see the omoarcural next to the procoracohumerus. And for others it'll be a bit on the side. It just depends on how those things shifted when they died. For the tiger salamanders, they're all here on the side. So there's procoracohumerus, and right next to it, omoarcural, which will look like a smaller version of procoracohumerus. On the arms, this is where I think your tiger salamander has a bit of an edge, because most of them have a really well-defined cephalic vein, which helps differentiate your triceps brachii and your humeroantebrachialis. The two arm muscles you may have trouble with are the humeroantebrachialis and the coracobrachialis, but the coracobrachialis is more medial, okay? And the same will be true with your mud puppy. He's got bigger arms, but the muscle tone is kind of weak. So there's our humeroantebrachialis, triceps brachii, and again, more close to the midline, coracobrachialis. All right, so looking at the back here, this is one of those nice mud puppies. Actually, let me switch hands for a minute. Here we can see our omoarcural right there next to the procoracohumerus. That shows pretty nicely on this guy. This is one of those mud puppies I like for the dorsal shoulder, because we've got 1, 2, 3 muscles here, and the middle muscle is a bright pink, which makes it easy to differentiate. Here's your cucularius, dorsalis scapulae, and of course latissimus dorsi. And Joshua, you did a nice job on protecting that. You can see it all very nicely there. And that bright pink dorsalis scapulae really makes it easy to differentiate the three muscles. But when you look at it on your tiger salamander, these guys are more muscular in some ways. So we look at it here, cupellaris, dorsalis scapulae, latissimus dorsi, really showing off well. So either one could be used, but this one really looks nice in terms of making it easy for you to see on the data practically. All right, so we had some big differences on the head. Not too much in the upper body, but lower body with the legs, they're the same, but they look different. Okay, they look different because of the shape of the pubis. So if we come down here and look at full frontal salamanders, and of course we can see how the pelvic muscles of our mud puppy come to a point, like you remember the pubis and pubo-ischiatic plate did. But if you look at your tiger salamander, there's no point. It's here, but it doesn't come up to a point. That's the real big difference. And it just throws you off a little bit when you're trying to get your starting point with learning the muscles. But here's our pubo-ischiofemoralis externus. Pubo-ischiofemoralis externus. Again, the externus is the internal one, and the internus is the external one because it's named for attachment to the pubo-ischiatic plate, not relative positioning. So we stretch this out here, and here we can see pubo-ischiofemoralis internus. Shorter muscle here, pubo-tibialis, pubo-ischiotibialis, and then the muscle that kind of hangs off the back of the leg like a hamstring, which flexes, is the ischioflexoris. I find that to be really useful. Now we look at these little guys. Muscles are better defined, no doubt about it, but they're tiny. So this is actually one of the smaller mud puppies too. I'm sorry, tiger salamanders we have also. But there's our little ischioflexoris, pubo-ischiotibialis, pubo-tibialis, and then pubo-ischiofemoralis internus. And these are ones you want origin and insertion questions on. You don't really want action, but when you think about it, you can figure out the action pretty easily. Now we get to the area where a lot of people are having trouble. It's the back of the leg. All right? Looking at these little teeny ilio muscles here. Where do you start? This blood vessel is going to help you. Right? That blood vessel. On either animal, that blood vessel. And even if you don't have the blood vessel, you got a gap here between ventral and dorsal aspects of the thigh. So once you're above the blood vessel, there's your first ilio, second, and third. The first ilio, iliotibialis. Then ilioextensoris. And the most lateral one, like the more lateral of your two shin bones, iliofibularis. Okay? So it goes, if you want to think about it this way, F-E-T. Fibularis, extensoris, tibialis. Feet over the feet. It's stupid, I know, but if it works. I think we've covered all of those muscles. Any ones I missed or any questions? All right. Looks like we don't have any rats out right now, so in a little bit when you guys start looking at rats